Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last of the series on organ donation that we are running. Uh, the key point that we want to remind and everybody to take away with is that each of us can save lives. And it's never been more important than now during these COVID times to be able to do that. Um, Last month was Organ Donation Awareness Week, and as part of this, that we are doing this series on, uh, you know, reminding people on the need for organ donation, not just living organ donation, but as well as deceased organ or cadaveric organ donation. A quick reminder, Patients Engage is an online platform which has been operational for over 5 years. We are focused on holistic and evidence-based management of chronic conditions, largely from the perspective of patients and family caregivers. We strongly believe in the value of lived experiences and how being empowered and being engaged uh, really helps in getting a better quality of life in our own health and disease management. So without spending too much of time, let me introduce our panelists today. First up, we have Mr. Gopal Chandra Das and Sheetal Das. Gopal Chandra Das donated his wife Suchitra Das's organs earlier this year. We then have Dr. Vasanti Ramesh, who is Director of uh, National Organ and Tissue Transplant Organization, which is a pan-India organization. And she recently won the Women in Transplant Unsung Hero Award of 2020 as well. We also have with us Dr. Prateek Das, who's a chief nephrologist at Narayan Health, Kolkata, and Anindita Sabath, who's the transplant coordinator at SOTO, which is the state organization for Odisha. And I think we can't forget Mrs. Suchitra Das, whose organs were donated. She was the second deceased donor for Orissa. So I think a moment to reflect on her donations and how it benefited others' lives. Quick reminder to our audience, the information discussed here is based on experience of the panelists and is not to be taken as medical advice. If you have specific medical issues, please consult your doctor. This session is being recorded. If you logged into Zoom, please post your questions on the Q&A. If you're on Facebook, post them on the live feed and we'll pick them up from there. Any comments, etc., always welcome. You can always follow us on all our social media channels. You can check out our website, patientsengage.com, or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. All these webinars that we conduct get recorded and put up on YouTube. So if you subscribe to the channel, you won't miss them there either. And if you want to keep track of future announcements, you can also follow our page, Facebook, where we announce them. We are also on Instagram. And if you have any experience to share, you can write into us at editor@patientsengage.com. So I will stop sharing for now, and we can then move into the discussion with the panel. So let's start with you, Dr. Vasanti. If you can unmute yourself, yeah. Could you explain to us, we are a large country, we have a fairly high number of road accidents. So one would think that we would not need a specific drive to get people to donate. So why is there a need for organ donation drive?
Good evening, Aparna. It's an absolute pleasure talking to you and being a part of this discussion on raising the awareness about organ and tissue donation and transplantation. Yes, you very rightly said that there are a large number of road traffic accidents in our country. According to the WHO statistics of 2015, about 1.5 lakh people are involved in road traffic accidents in our country. And road traffic accidents is one of the most important cause of head injury, which in turn is the reason why people land in a brain dead stage,
Hmm.
whereby they are the most ideal donors. Our attempt should be twofold. On one side, to reduce the incidence of road traffic accidents.
Sure.
On the other side, those who have indeed been involved and with the best of care have landed in a state of brain death continue to live through their organs, though not as a whole,
Hmm.
by being placed in at least 8 people to whom also they give lives.
Right.
So I think that is a glorious thing that one's organs can continue to live on in 8 other people and also giving them lives,
Hmm.
as well as improving the quality of quite a few people, maybe even up to 50, by the contribution of the tissues.
Right.
The most
Right.
important and the most familiar being eye donations.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vasanti. Dr. Das, are you back on? If you are, if you can turn your video on and unmute yourself. Could you explain a little bit more about brain death to our audience?
Basically, brain death, the concept of brain death is basically a brain stem death. Basically, brain stem is an area which connects the brain with the rest of the body. So basically, you know, in the history, we used to, there is a decapacitation like guillotine and everything. That is an anatomical separation between the head and the rest of the body. Here we consider about this physiological separation. So the brain is no longer attached to the whole of the body. That we call it a brainstem death. And this brainstem death concept has been there since long time, long before it was utilized in the organ transplantation thing. And
Right.
here we tell that there are so many concepts of brain death, and there are so many criteria that has been changed over time. So what today exists is basically an UK protocol that has been accepted by our Organ Transplantation Act. Here we tell that must be some preconditions, there must be some inclusions, there must be some exclusions. Preconditions like this is the patients who are in the ICU, they are on the ventilator, and they are totally dependent on the ventilator and deeply comatose, inability to remain conscious, inability to breathe by themselves. And
Right.
in this group of, along with that, there may be some positive evidence to say that he has got a brain damage, like there is something in the brain, hemorrhage, tumor, or a thrombus, or like that. So once the patient is in the ICU, he or she is deeply comatose, and at the same time doesn't have any own respiration or breathing. He doesn't have any epilepsy, abnormal movements in the body. Even there should be no any decerebrate posturing like thing. Then the preconditions it is fulfilled that yes, this may be a candidate, he or she may be a candidate for the organ donation or brainstem declaration means something, because
Right.
the first idea of any medical science personnel is to save a life, not to declare a death. So before declaring death, there must be some precondition. At the same time, we should also exclude some things, particularly in very children. These criteria may not be fulfilled less than 3 years of age. There should not be any evidence that he or she is under any influence of any antidepressant drug, hypothermia, like that. There will be something which may also cause the similar conditions. That should not be there. At the same time, if these exclusion criteria these are excluded, then we have to test that these things are brainstem is death by doing a brainstem reflexes. Brainstem reflex is a simple clinical test. There's nothing big instruments, big expertise is not required. Just by simple bedside clinical test to say his brainstem pupil reflex is absent, corneal reflex is not there, gag reflex is not there. He cannot breathe properly. And if this also fulfilled, then we do an apnea test. And if this is fulfilled, then we consider the patient is basically a brainstem dead, but his body may function properly. The heart will beat, the kidney will function, liver is going to function. These are the situation when there is no scope that this person can be alive again and to go a normal life. This is the condition where you can procure the organ and we can utilize it to save the other lives. So
Right.
brainstem death is this totally, sometimes we are asked that we are planned to donate our body to the anatomy room of the medical college. This is a practice of very many persons. After death, they pledge their body is to be there. But this is not the thing. We're not. That is totally different. This should be a person within a ICU, deeply comatose, totally dependent on ventilator, and we have excluded any possible reversibility. And at the same time, we have tested them positive for the brainstem is death. And this is the condition in today's science we consider is a brain death or a brainstem death, whatever you tell it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Das. Before we get to, Anandita and Mr. Das, Dr. Vasanti, just wanted to understand, as a country, I know we do have a lot of living donor transplants of kidneys. We have a fair number of eye donations, and I presume therefore transplants. Where are we in terms of the total landscape of transplants in India, and which ones? I mean, obviously living is higher, but why is there a need for disease donor transplants as well?
See, in a country with 1.4 billion people and being the diabetic capital of the world, obviously the incidence of non-communicable diseases as a whole is on the rise. And with the change in lifestyle that has happened, it is leading to a further increase. So all these are going to be responsible for a higher incidence of end-stage organ failures, be it of kidneys, liver, heart, or lungs. Added to it, the longevity of the population, which is increasing day by day, will also lead to increase in the numbers of these end-stage organ failures. And as of today, the best treatment that we have in our armamentarium is a transplant. The only exception being kidney, where life can be sustained by dialysis.
Right.
In our country, the diseased organ donation rate is quite dismal. It is at 0.52 per million population, as compared to Spain, which is supposed to have the largest, which has about 49.6 per million population.
Wow.
Of course, our actual number of transplants, if you see, is almost double that of Spain. But by virtue of the population needs, it is a minuscule. And therefore, we have to augment both the living and particularly the diseased organ donations. Because diseased donations come without any price to the donor.
Right.
The donor is no more, but we are able to give the opportunity for his organs to survive, and in the process 8 lives can be saved of those who are in end-stage organ failures. In our country, there is a significant discrepancy among the states in terms of transplants, in terms of the living donor transplants, and in terms of the disease donor transplants that are being done. So if you see, say, the statistics of 2019, Maharashtra had the highest number of disease donations, the donors.
Right.
But the translation into the number of organs transplanted, Tamil Nadu scored over. So the number of organs utilized per donor was far higher in Tamil Nadu than in Maharashtra. Telangana is also doing fairly well. So these 3 states have contributed the maximum to the disease donations and the disease donor transplants. In contrast, Delhi NCR performs the maximum number of living donor transplants, which is almost double that of Tamil Nadu or Maharashtra or any other place.
Wow.
But in contrast, the disease donor transplants have not taken off.
Not taken off. Right.
So there is a lot that needs to be done. And it is not possible to, localize ourselves to either diseased or living. We would need both to fulfill the needs for transplant. But we have to emphasize on the disease donor transplants because there is no risk to the donor whatsoever.
Right.
In a kidney transplant, we have two kidneys, and the removal of a kidney is not as difficult. But in a living donor liver transplant, there is a definite risk, even though it may be small, but there is a definite risk of life and for morbidity to the living donor. And therefore, promotion of disease donor transplants is even more important.
Right.
In our country, organs such as the pancreas, small bowel, lungs, part of lungs, part of pancreas, etc., are not being undertaken as a living donor transplant because of the associated morbidity and mortality. So they are largely disease donor transplants which are done. And pancreatic transplants are more often a combined kidney pancreas transplants because then they are being diabetics, type 1 diabetics, and their tendency to go into renal failure when they are in such a state. So it is beneficial to have a combined kidney pancreas transplant, which is being done both in the north and the southern parts of the country.
Right.
Also in places like Gujarat, in IKDRC and so on. So we do have a large number of centers which are also doing multi-organ transplants. It may be kidney, pancreas, it may be heart and lung, it may be liver and kidney. So all kinds of transplants, the spectrum of it we have. If only we could increase our diseased organ donation rate, then we would qualify in all ways to be a level 5 country as per the WHO.
Thank you, Dr. Vasanti. Mr. Das and Sheetal, let me ask you, Mr. Das, can you describe a little bit, what happened and what did you feel when the request was first made for your wife? First of all, just tell us kind of the suddenness of her illness, and then how was the request made and what did you feel about it?
So on February 23rd, we were at home, and after our lunch, just my wife, at a late time, around 4 p.m., she went to have her afternoon nap. After a few minutes, she called me, just listen. So I went and entered into the bedroom and found that she told me that my head is aching. What happened? What to do? Shall we move to hospital? No, you sit beside me. And just, I have told me that just massage my head and my back. Just I have done some massage. She told me for a glass of water. So I rushed and gave her a glass of water. But after 2-3 sips, she started just vomiting. So I sat her in the floor in the bedroom itself. Oh, okay, you complete your vomiting, no problem. So I was there. So after that, she washed her face and mouth. Then she went up to the bed and told me that please, would you kindly clean it? No problem. Are you feeling all right, or we will move to hospital? Any problem? No, nothing. You just clean it. And I want to take rest. I want some sound. I want some sleep. I want to sleep. So after that, she slept for 2.5 hours. So after that, I just wake up her. It was evening, most probably. So Suchitra, you wake up, and I have tried her, but she would not reply. I won't get any reply, and I was shocked. So immediately it was Sunday. So immediately I called my friends and nearby my friends. They all come, and here also Doctor, my brother, my cousin brother is a doctor, medicine specialist. We also called him. He came and tested everything and found that he told me that no, she has gone to coma. So in the meantime, my friends have already made arrangements for ambulance and we went to hospital. So there only the doctors went for this MRI or CT scan. So there only we could be able to know that she has a massive brain stroke. And the report they have shown me, and that it was in the inner brain. There was some leakage in the inner brain. So doctor has advised not we cannot do anything now, and the patient has to be on ventilator. I said okay. Then second day the doctors have tried. Second day they have drilled some pipe on the head in the ICU itself, put out some bloods like that, and they have tried. But on 25th they have told us that no, she won't survive. And so we were panicked in that situation. What happened? No. She won't survive, and she has totally her brain has brain is not working. So what to do? In the meantime, my friends and relatives they have just suggested me because it was 3 days there, and they have suggested me that when we are losing our own person, still then, if it can be, if you will donate some organs, that would have better. So they have proposed me, and I have also asked my son and daughter, and my brother-in-law was with me there in the hospital. So it was a family decision. We entire family and friends, we have decided that yes, we will go for donating some organs. Then on 25th itself, we have asked the doctor and proposed him, Dr. Panda, we have proposed ourselves, we have proposed him that we are going for organ donation. So he made all arrangements and tried to keep the patient alive, made some arrangements, and then process started. On 26th evening, doctor have in the noon itself, doctor have told on 26th that no, patient has brain dead, and we will start our organ donation in the evening after 6 hours. And at 6:14 they have declared the patient has brain dead, and that transplant of organs have started. And we could be able to give only 2 kidneys, and we are just asking the doctors if we are giving 2 kidneys, why not lungs, heart, or other important organs, if it would have better for other
Correct.
life. So they have tried, but it could not be arranged or it could not be materialized. Only 2 kidneys we have donated. And in this, all my family members, my friends, all have appreciated it. Then what more, madam?
Right. Thank you.
One thing, madam, we have lost. I have lost my wife. My children have lost their mom. That is fast. But what to do? That is that God has taken her. We have to accept it.
Right. But it's very creditable that, on your own volition, you made the offer. Anandita, as a transplant coordinator, what are the typical challenges you faced, or do you face any challenges when you're talking to family members?
Yeah, because you have to notice.
Can you speak up a little bit? Sorry.
Hello. Yeah, is it audible?
Yeah.
So here, from my personal experience, what I can say is the first, if the family is convinced for organ donation, the first thing that comes up is how much time will you take? Like, because we need to take our family member back and we have to do the last rites and all. And so how much time will you take to do this transplant, like the retrieval process? How much time will it take? And another issue that we face as coordinators is the family. It is their, obviously it is their curiosity to know like who the organ is going to. They want to know who the organ is going to. But as per the policy, as per the act, it is we cannot disclose the names of the recipient. So this is this we as a coordinator, sometimes we face this issue to convince them that yes, it is going to the person who is actually in need of the organ. And the most of the time the query is about the time. How much time will you take for the retrieval? Because lots of things after that is involved. So for that, that is the main issue.
Right, right. Thank you. So I think, so just a quick question to Dr. Vasanthi. Mr. Das said that they could only take the kidneys or even Anandita. Is that because at the moment in Odisha, they are not ready to do the other transplants, heart, liver, lung, or?
It is not necessary for a hospital to be able to perform even a single kind of transplant,
Right.
to be able to retrieve any organ. I think this knowledge should percolate among the transplant coordinators in particular and among the general public in general.
Right.
The reason being, the retrieval is invariably going to be done by the transplant surgeon himself or herself. So whoever is going to transplant is going to come to the hospital where the retrieval is done and is going to retrieve the organ and take it with, him or her and transplant it into his own patient who will be a recipient. So there is no need to have facilities for transplant of, say, heart, lung, liver, etc., to be able to retrieve these organs. If they have the instruments and the requirements, that's good enough. But if they don't have, if they convey to the transplant surgeons, they would even be prepared with that and they would come.
Right.
So I think that is not an issue. And I would request Anandita to henceforth request during her counseling sessions for donation of all organs and tissues. And you can contact Noto at any time for organs that you are unable to use. It is understandable that Odisha has got its SOTO in the recent past and transplant activities have just started. It is good that it has, and I'm sure it will take wings and you will be doing all the organs in a matter of time. But till then, I would request you not to waste the organs, particularly when you have donor families like Mr. Das. So we should utilize all the organs possible. See, that is where Tamil Nadu has scored over others. Though they had less number of donors, still their number of transplants were much, much more. So one thing is mobilizing as many donors as possible. The second is using as many organs as possible from each donor.
Right.
That is how we can really increase the supply of organs to match with the needs of the transplantable organs. So this, if we focus, concentrate, and strive towards it, we could make a big difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Das, I think, can you also highlight, in your view as a, as a nephrologist, what are you seeing as the challenges and what steps you think need to be taken to improve the process?
Basically, so for kidneys concerned, as we have already heard from the director, that we have fortunately have 2 kidneys. So and the kidneys, removal of the kidneys in surgically is not that difficult as liver or heart is. So we are slightly fortunate that we can utilize both the live donor as well as the cadaveric donor, because
Correct.
a human being can survive with one functioning kidney if it is functions well. So that's why worldwide, in so far kidney is concerned, this is the quite the number of living donation is much more, and compared to liver and other organs, and it is acting as basically complementary, living donations and the cadaveric donations. So if the initially it is said that in a long-term follow-up, if you see the cadaveric kidney versus the living kidney, the survival and the complications are slightly lesser in cases of the living kidneys. They survive more, chances of rejection is less. And if the both opportunities are there and the donor fulfills the criteria, then living donation, so for kidneys concerned, slightly scored over this is cadaveric transplantation.
Right.
But mind it, that in the living donation also, the strict criteria has to be fulfilled by the donor, because donor safety is first.
Correct.
Because he's a living person, he should not suffer, he or she should not suffer from any kind of kidney related issues or other health issues. Neither there should be any anesthetic hazard, there should not be any long-term increased incidence of death in this patient. That has to be taken into account. And secondly, in living donation, you can take only one kidneys. In the cadaveric, you can do both the kidneys, and if the both functions, so you can give it to the two persons. But
Right.
sometimes it doesn't happen. And in some situations, suppose liver is concerned, you are taking a liver from a cadaver and the liver is not properly functioning. The surgeon and the transplant team will not take that liver.
Right.
In cases of kidney, if the kidney slightly functions less, and if you are satisfied by doing some test, you can take both kidneys and you just add the functions of the both kidneys and you can transplant them to a single person. Suppose
Right.
kidney should function as 50 plus 50, they're functioning 30 plus 30. In living cases, you cannot take the 30 plus 30 kidney, but in cadaver, you can take both 30 plus 30 and give both the kidneys to a person to give a 60 kidney functions. So that is the advantages in cases of the
Disease.
so for the cadaveric disease donor is concerned, the challenges are the same. Not everybody is like that. Mr. Das's family, they have done a tremendous job to the mankind.
Right.
They have done just, you cannot explain. They just cannot give thanks more than this. But every time it is not like that. Coordinator Anindita must have faced this, that the families are families goes to the faces. Initially, there is a strong denial. You don't believe that our patient is a brain dead patient. What are you telling that? You have faced that. After that, they become angry. You have not done the treatment properly. We as the clinician, we face, I have not done properly this. It would have been done. That would have been, my father was okay 2 days back. Why he is like that? Then there is they start the bargaining. Yes, if we donate kidney, then if we donate our organs, what can we get? And after that, gradually they get depressed and ultimately comes to the phase of complete acceptance. So
Right.
this has to be, most of the cases, the families are like that. When we do more and more cadaver transplant, these things will be more easier because there is a kind of positive feedback kind of thing. You can see Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, they are doing 2 and they are getting 2 more because this is a positive feedback kind of thing. If the 5 families donate, then another 3 families, they are encouraged and they donate.
Correct.
So the initial phases, the effort is slightly more, and if they explain, then they will donate all the organ like that of the kidneys also. So
Right.
for the living donation of the kidneys concerned, there is a very strict criteria. But if they fulfill the criteria, then the chances of the long-term survival of the donation is much good. Because
Right.
if you compare that, if a patient with 1 kidney who has donated the kidney versus to a person who have not donated, there are 3 things we are concerned: whether their kidney will fail in future or not. In the study, it has been seen that they are equal. In 30-35 years follow-up, the kidney doesn't fail. Secondly, there is another possibility, if there is any possibility of morbidity or mortality during the surgery. Initially, with the crude surgery, we used to do the open nephrectomy, the open big scar. There is a mortality was in the tune of 3 per 1,000. But with the time, the surgical skill has been drastically changed. Now we are doing this as a microscope, or this is a laparoscopic surgery, robotic surgery, and this is chances of death during the procedure is much less. It is 1 in 1 lakh, 2 lakhs. That is less than the chances of getting accident when you go through aeroplane. So
Right.
basically, this is much less insignificant. And
Right.
thirdly, there is another issue is that there's increased chances of the cardiovascular disease or in the future, because kidney patients suffer from the cardiovascular disease. You have taken the kidney, so sometimes it is thought that they have become a kidney patient. So whether this is more or not, and long-term study has also shown that this is also doesn't there. So if you take this stringent criteria for the kidney donation that has been fixed up by the KDIGO or the KDOGI, the bodies, if you take in that way for a living donor, the chances of surgical risk is much less, much less, practically negligible. Long-term survival is not benefited, and the kidney doesn't fail until and unless they suffer from an incidental disease. Suppose the patient is having one kidney, in between he develops some severe sepsis, septicemia, and can kind of acute renal failure. Like that, in those cases, there will be chances of kidney failure will be there. Other than this, we usually kidney donation is pretty safe a procedure. So in both cases, there are challenges, there are benefits, but ultimately benefits is to the patients.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Das. I want to pick up on, I'm just going to mute a little. I just want to pick up on the fact that you said that, there is sometimes concern about the patient safety. So Dr. Vasanthi, how is patient safety kind of, guarded, right? Because patients sometimes, or families, have the view that if a patient has signed a donor card or has pledged their organs, then the doctors will not make the effort, or the hospital won't make the effort to save them or to safeguard their interests. So can you just talk the audience through the process, or the controls that are there to ensure that that doesn't happen?
See, the fundamental principle of any doctor is to save life. So in an attempt to save another life, no doctor will give up one life. So I would consider it more a myth or a misconception rather than even, have a remotest sense of its being a reality.
Right.
And the other thing is, it is not as if that if one has a road traffic accident, they are always going to be in a hospital, which is a transplant center. And the people who are caring for the patients are not the people who are performing the transplants.
Right. Right.
Particularly brain death can occur only in an ICU setup.
Right.
And intensive care specialists are trained exclusively to take care of such sick patients. And their motto is to save them, and their reputation is by saving them. So I do not think any intensivist, would want to not try his or her best to save the life of an individual who has been admitted under them.
Right.
So I think this feeling that somehow has got in the minds of public, to a small extent though, should completely be eradicated, because there is no truth in it.
Right. Right.
On the other hand, like if one, now with end of life care, which is being defined in greater detail.
Right.
Recently, the ICMR also came up with do not attempt resuscitation protocols, and which have been legalized. But that is only to attempt resuscitation as of now, which has become legal. So if, someone who's suffering from a terminal illness, maybe like cancer, if they do not want to be intubated, resuscitated and all that, because it is known to be futile, just prolonging life for a few minutes or hours or days is not going to make a difference. So they would rather not want to be violated in that sense of the term. So then they can opt not to be resuscitated. This is existing in the Western countries as a routine that they
Right.
can opt to be resuscitated or otherwise.
Right.
This has come into place in our country as well. But, you know, say if it is a young patient who has sustained a road traffic accident, it is his right to be resuscitated. And I think it is the duty of every doctor to do it, unless and until it is specifically given in writing that it should not be done. And it is invariably done in all hospitals.
Right.
And
Right.
in doing so, when they are in the ICU, if they go into a brain dead state, then it is possible that, you know, they may become organ donors. But there are very defined criteria. For example, in head injuries, we do what is called as a Glasgow Coma Scale, which in a normal person is 15 by 15.
Right.
And, you know, in a person who has no activity, it will be 3 by 15. So anything below 8, anything below 5, it is possible that the person is a potential brain dead person. And to be declared as a brain dead person, it would be 3. In addition, as Dr. Das had rightly pointed out, that there would be no activity. And also you have to rule out other conditions which can make a person comatose, like hyponatremia, electrolyte disturbances, drugs, so on and so forth. Or if
Right.
they've been on any medications, psychiatric medications and the
Right.
like.
Right.
So it is important that, you know, we bear in mind all these things and understand that the principle of anyone who is a doctor, particularly
Right.
working in intensive care, is to
Right.
save lives and not to take away.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vasanti. Anandita, on the case, I know Orissa has just started, right? So, what is the impact of COVID on the donations or the, transplants? What are you seeing as a transplant coordinator?
So, as I can as I can say, for brain death or head injury is a major contributor to a person to be known called brain death.
Can you
And
speak
head
up a
injury,
little bit, please?
yeah, is it audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So due to this COVID thing, the lockdown and traffic has been reduced a lot, for which the road traffic accidents has come down. For which the head injury patients are comparatively less in the hospitals. And other thing that has impacted is patients, the transplant patients, the recipients are not able to go to the transplant centers because of the interstate and the intrastate travel restrictions. They're not being able to go to the hospitals. And another thing that has impacted, COVID has impacted, is because majority, as Dr. Vasanti said, ICU plays a major role. The donor has to be stabilized in the ICU. So in majority of the hospitals, the ICUs are reorganized for the COVID patients.
COVID
ICUs
patients.
are not available for the brain death patients. So these are, and again, virtual consultation are being done and patients are not coming to the hospitals. So yes, COVID has impacted the donor availability of organs as well, and also the transplant activity also. But at the same time, I can say this is the new normal now. Like, we have to adapt to this and adjust to this thing. And we have to reassess our guidelines and protocols. Everything has to be in place to again start the number of transplant that used to happen before COVID. So as Dr. Vasanti said, already Noto has published certain guidelines for the transplant, to again start the transplantation, and in a proper manner, taking the COVID situation under consideration. So
Right. Right. Okay. So Dr. Vasanti, I know when we spoke about, you said actually the need for transplants may actually go up post, because of the post-COVID symptoms, right, or viral symptoms. What do you think we need to do to I guess one is to bring back transplants to a level, but also continue and increase the momentum of cadaveric donations.
See, there is a leaf that we can take from what Anandita said just now. The fact that COVID has been there has also very well established the role of preventive measures. The fact that people didn't go out on the road, the fact that they did not have opportunity to, go on a crowded lane, and accidents coming down has increased the number of road traffic accidents and consequential brain deaths. So I
Right.
think preventive measures in COVID are also important. For example, now they say that adoption of treatment with steroids and anticoagulants at the appropriate time can prevent lung fibrosis, because the need for transplants, particularly lung transplants, and some of the professional fields that heart transplants also, the need may go up. But particularly for lung transplants in COVID, more than the virus itself, it is the inflammatory process which is responsible for the need, because inflammation ultimately ends with fibrosis, and fibrosis destroys the lung capacity.
Right.
And when the lung capacity is destroyed beyond a point, it becomes an end organ lung failure, whereby they would need a transplant to survive. So I think in the management of COVID all across the world, there are a lot of studies going on as to how this could be prevented, and anti-inflammatory medications such as steroids and other medications are used. Role of different medications such as your HCQ and your rituximab and various things are also being studied, and they are being used as well. So with time, we will know which is the best and which is not as good as the other. But all these modalities have to be used so
Right.
that we prevent fibrosis. Basically, fibrosis has to be prevented to reduce the need for lung transplants. And in the COVID season, the other angle that we have to see before transplants is to ensure that neither the donor nor the recipient is COVID positive. Because
Right.
even for a post-COVID, when a transplant is needed, essentially the patient should be serologically negative when a transplant is thought of, so that a continued onslaught on the transplanted organ is not there. It is not
Right.
as if when the peak of COVID, when the patient is in the inflammatory phase, that you will go for a transplant. The indication for lung transplant in post-COVID is also similar to other indications of transplant, where the lung is destroyed due to the inflammatory process.
Right. Right. Question for you, Sheetal and Anandita, right? I mean, I think increasingly what we are hearing is that older people are talking about donation. And I'm targeting the two of you because you're the youngest in this panel here. How do we get young people to pledge? How do we get young people to think about and talk to their families about their desire for organ donation? Any thoughts on that? Because obviously younger organs are likely to be healthier than people who are older. So Anandita, you want to go first? Sheetal after that?
Yeah, so from my experience, what I'm saying is I have come across families where the younger people, like the son or the daughter, they are coming forward for organ donation of the parents or uh, parents, and the children, they come and talk to us about what is the scope of organ donation. And like more because of the awareness programs as well, the awareness programs among which is being conducted in colleges, schools, and street plays are done. So the younger generation are much more educated towards the topic of organ donation. They have some a bit extra knowledge about organ donation, and in families, they come up and talk to their parents about organ donation. And I have also like come across youngsters who come up and say that my parents are not agreeing for me to pledge for organ donation. How do I convince them? So the younger generations are much they want to come forward for this organ donation. They want to come forward for volunteering for organ donation. They want to like organize awareness programs to talk about organ donation. So yes, but still we need to because younger generation, the youngsters in the family, they can be a medium to convey this message to the older generation in the family. So yes, the awareness programs which is still going on, it can be like increased in order to bring more and more awareness about this topic among the youngsters.
Okay. And when they talk to their families, are they able to convince their families? Because that's sometimes a challenge, right? When they talk to their parents, the parents will say, why do you want to talk about all these negative things?
Yeah. So what I tell them is, because organ donation is a thing that now see, we are pledging for organ donation now, but it is after our death. It is the next of kin who is in the who is at the position of taking the decision. So what I tell the young, what we counsel, what we tell the younger generation is, it is just a way of like conveying our wish to our family members that yes, at least we'll be of good, we will be of some use to the society, because lots and lots of people are there who are in need of an organ, be it a young child or an older person. So if we can contribute in some way to the society, then why not?
Right, right. Sheetal, do you want to add anything?
See, from my personal experience, I would like to tell that if we can give life after life, then what more can we expect from we being literate? The literate generation, the generation of ours, we obviously want people to get inspired from us. My mother was the second cadaveric organ donor from Odisha. She was just the second one. So it was complete shock for us, for the whole family. But when my father called and asked me and my brother, the first thing that we told was, yes, we will do this. Because if we set the trend, we can give a live example to others that even after death, the other lives can live their life happily. Because see, since my mother gave kidneys, the persons who would have got the kidneys would have been in a bad state, would have been going through dialysis or some other medical things which need to be taken care of all the time. But this single organ was able to give life to others. So yeah, obviously the generation from us, our generation completely should pledge by and go ahead with organ donation.
Okay, thank you, Sheetal. Dr. Das, one more question on kidney donations, because that's an area where we do have living donors. We do know that in India, the large number of kidney donors are women, typically the wife or the mother, sometimes the sister. I mean, there's probably, a feeling of risk, etc. Can you kind of explain to the audience the quality of life for both? I mean, obviously we know the benefit to the recipient, but what is the impact on quality of life and, mortality, etc., comorbidities for the donor, so that as Dr. Vasanthi said, we need to increase more living as well as, disease donors. So if you can just talk through that. And I'm picking kidney because that's one of the few cases where we can do living, and it is a large need in our country.
Basically, when we consider as a living donation, the society still now, we agree or disagree in that way that they either the females, they willingly or not willingly, they agree for their kidney donation to their son, to their husband, to their brother, anybody. So in that situations, they also comes forward. Not only every time they are willing, but sometimes they may be afraid that they have to undergo through a surgical procedure like that.
Correct.
A female from a very village, he or she may not agree with that. But with family pressure, sometimes they agree. In that situation, we do talk to them individually. We try to learn their feeling, their willingness, their everything. And after that, we decide after a proper psychological assessment, then only we would do that. But still that mostly of the living donors of the kidneys are the till now females. But in the recent past 2, 3, 5 years, we have seen more and more male donors are coming up.
Okay.
Recently, we have done around 10 and 11 transplants where the son has donated their mother or father parents. That has not been very practiced in our society. You have seen it from the other countries. We have done the transplants from the Myanmar, Bangladesh. In those situations, that is there. But in India, we keep our son, daughters, and children in like that. We don't allow them to donate. Oh, he is a so much small child. But in new generation like them, they are agreeing. They understand what is that in those situations. So if you see the percentage of the male donation that has been increased in the last few years. In those situations, there is 3 or 4 common questions they ask to. One, what are the things I need to go for these kidney transplantations? Then we tell them you have to test. The tests are mostly non-invasive tests other than some CT angiography. Everything is a painless and non-invasive test. Secondly, if you are there are some paperwork and you have to undergo surgery. Surgery is like that of a gallbladder surgery. It is done under general anesthesia. But after proper anesthetic checkup, it is done in a laparoscopic manner with a minimum injury to them. And after that, they have to stay hospital for 3-4 days. There is a minimum negligible chances of complications in their stay. With this small surgery, pain is also much less. These minor things they ask, what will be the pain? And after that, then you have to stay, because in our family, especially in cases of the females, the wife donated the kidney, and after discharge, he is cooking, she is cooking, she is getting the food for her husband, giving medicines. In those situations, there might be chances of some complications because there may be some wound infections, stitch give away, there may be some small hernias like that. This can happen. So we ask them to keep in a restful period for at least a month, and after that they can go back to their journey. And if until and unless I have already told something big happens to them, that I will discuss, there is hardly any possibility of development any kidney related comorbidities in the future. But there are some exceptions. Suppose a family who has got both parents diabetic, because suppose mother is diseased and father wants to donate, but he is a diabetic, you cannot take the kidney from a diabetic, and the son is of age of say 32. If both parents are diabetic, there is a high probability that this child will develop diabetes in his future and will be threat to his kidneys. So in those situations, there is and we actually discourage them not to donate kidneys if both parents are diabetic and he or she is young, less than 35 years of age. So that has to be explained and convinced to them. Secondly, a female patient, if she donates to kidney to her husband or father, mother, anybody, and she has not completed her family. Because pregnancy situation where the kidney works 3 times more, 300%. It has to work in that way during pregnancy. So nothing happens to the life, but this is a physiological, but it's a supra-physiological situation is a pregnancy. If who has donated a kidney undergoes a pregnancy, there is a possibility that he or she may develop a pregnancy-related complications like pregnancy-induced hypertension or maybe preeclampsia like that. So in those situations, we also discourage the female who has not completed her family until and unless they are very willing. They are just adamant that they will give. We will tell them that these are the complications that may happen, and if you who have completed, who have one child and planning for a second child, you tell them at first you wait for a year and you will discuss with us, and after that only you should go ahead with the pregnancy. So these are the few situations, and sometimes the addiction issues is more important. If the donor develops addiction after some time, basically there's alcohol related issues and there's smoking. If it is there during the transplantation, you don't accept them as donor. But if it develops after that, there is chances of. So until the special issues are there is a pretty kidney donation. So for living donation is concerned, if you take the guideline and the criteria before the donation, then it is a pretty safe procedure in the long run. So
Okay.
we always have to try to ask them to give you donate kidney. There will hardly any problem in your future life. So
Right.
that I also try to convey from this platform, that if it is taken properly with the proper tests prior to that, there is hardly chances of renal failure, no
Right.
chances of mortality, excess mortality in the future. Rather, you can get tested. We have done so many cases. Tested, we do the 30-40 tests for the donor. And if he or she has subabnormality, we have tested and why. And during evaluation, she was detected to have a pancreatic SOL, pancreatic cancer, and that has been treated. And at the other time, there's another person donated to the kidney, and all the three are alive.
Wow.
So if something is there is a thorough health checkup, and you can pick up those abnormalities, and we can treat them in that way.
Right.
Just two things I want to just 1 minute. One is in a COVID era, so far kidney is concerned, so one big part of the kidney transplantation is a recipient. You know, any transplant recipient is severely immunocompromised. You give them medicines and give them medicines to reduce their immunity so that rejection doesn't happen. And as much as we are aware of the COVID, it is very fatal and it is very aggressive in immunocompromised patients. So we have to think of them also. Even we get the kidney, we have to convince them. They are also afraid. We have to convince them, tell them, not only that we test the recipient and the donor, there are caregivers, there are the doctors, there are the family members, there are the radiologists, technician, this lab personnel. Everybody can be a potential source of this transmission of this COVID. So considering to this, the NOTO has issued a guideline of everything. So we have to shift to a new normal that we are telling in the situation, considering an important fact that we are putting a patient in immunocompromised state. But now the people understand that equal risk is also involved in the dialysis, because they have to visit a dialysis unit frequently, share the same room, same lift, same wheelchair. So there is also possibility of getting infection from there. Now, initial phases, they are disagreed to undergo transplantation, but gradually now they are agreed, yes, we are ready for transplantation because you understood the things.
Right, right. And I guess there's a limit to how long you can delay, right? So earlier the feeling was that this will go away in a month or two, but you know, there's no signs of it going away. So I think we kind of end of our time, but I'll just go around the panel once. Dr. Vasanthi, one final message to our audience.
See, in the times of COVID, I think we should stay safe, take all precautionary measures not to contract the disease. But for those who need treatment for any chronic illness, we should be able to offer them that treatment. And the fundamental thing that we have advised most of these centers is that they try to maintain a COVID-free pathway for patients other than COVID conditions.
Right.
Thereby decreasing the incidence of developing COVID while in the hospital, or as Dr. Das said, in the post-operative period when the patient is on immunosuppressants. So that is a very important thing, which is very particularly contextual. And the other thing is, most important thing, that all of us should come forward to pledge. You can go to the NOTO helpline, www.notto.gov.in, and you can pledge online, or you could even download the form 7, and pledge offline, and you can send it to NOTO and we will send you a card. If you pledge online, the card will come to you by mail, of which you can take a printout, which you can have in your wallet or your purse. And if any time anybody is aware of anyone wanting to donate, say a cornea or organs or tissues, and they need any help, they can contact the NOTO helpline, which is 24/7, the number of which is 1800-11-4770. I repeat, 1800-11-4770. So our staff at the call center will answer all their queries and help them in cornea retrieval, if anyone's relative has passed away and they are willing to have corneas donated. And also they can inquire about other organ donations, tissue donations, transplantation, and whatever queries they have. We would be very happy to answer that. And we do hope that this program, Aparna, that you have done, a very sterling performance, does help in increasing awareness and thereby increasing the organ donation rates, particularly the diseased organ donation rates. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vasanthi. We will put those links in the, at the bottom of the recordings as well, so that, people have that. Anandita, coming to you, what is your final message to the audience?
Yeah, so as I said, the society the awareness has increased, but still it is always our duty to make more and more people know about this process of organ donation. And so it is, everybody has the ability to change in the society. So at least we should never we should at least use some of our time to talk to people around us about organ donation and how anybody be, and it can start from the family. So it has to start from the family, and then we can go out and talk about organ donation. So it has to be a common thing. So that's it. Thank you so much, Aparna. Thank you for this opportunity.
No problem. Thanks, Anandita. Dr. Das, any final message?
Is that let's make a practice, that makes a habit, that we will pledge our organs and we'll tell that we will donate, because it is a positive feedback kind of thing. If you donate one more will donate. If donates two, third one will donate. So we make a practice, because the science has made the miracle. Transplantation is the most important miracle that medicine has developed in last century. So let's donate and save lives. Even be it a COVID or a post-COVID era, it should go on. Show must go on.
Thank you, Dr. Das. And coming back to you, Mr. Gopal Chandra and Sheetal Das, your final.
So we would also like to tell that life after life is very important, and everybody should pledge to donate their organs. This can be a part of education also. If this can be done under education, and if can be taught at homes, then every individual, starting from an early age, they can know the value of organ donation, and they can see how other people are getting benefited from our deceased beloved ones who have lost their lives. So I would always like to tell this, bring this topic into every place. If any place that we go to, we can talk about it and make it more aware. And in India, since it is not only in India, I would like to tell, especially in Odisha, this should be done more and more. People should get more influenced and should donate their organs.
Thank you. So, and I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Mr.
Yes. My view is organ donation. In what time? When your near and dear ones, they are just passing, and before that, you have to take decision. So my appeal to the audience is, be strong. When your doctor says that your near and dear ones won't survive, trust them, trust doctors. And before he or she dies, you take decision so that his or her organs will be helpful to others and they can survive. So ultimately, your person is not dead, your person is live in their life. So this is my so I want to say all this much.
Thank you so much. Said it so eloquently, Mr. Das and Sheetal. And as Dr. Das said, that each one of you that comes forward to share that you have, donated, probably generates a few more who will talk about this and generate themselves. And I think you brought up a good point that it is being strong in that moment, right? Which is very, very important. And that's where often good intentions go out of the window. But I think it's a difficult juncture, but the more we've thought about it before and the more we've talked about it as a family is, it kind of helps the decision making. So thank you, everyone. I think it's been a really powerful discussion that we've had. And I'd like to thank Mohan Foundation, who supported us throughout the series, as well as Biocon. And I think each one of you who has stepped forward, taking time out of your busy schedules to share your experiences and to share your knowledge. So Dr. Vasanti, thank you so much. Dr. Das, Anandita, and last but not the least, Mr. Gopal Chandra and Sheetal Das. Thank you so much. And to the audience, if you've not done it yet, have that conversation over a coffee, over a dinner, have multiple conversations with your families, and please do pledge and also make sure that everybody is aware of that as well. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Aparna. And I would like to express my particular thanks to Mr. Gopal Chandra Das and Sheetal for the absolutely wonderful thing that they've done and given lives to 2 people. And also, I think they are going to be the flag bearers who are going to take this forward. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm just stopping the live stream now. Okay.